What's going on, guys? I have a video I wanted to do. I'm going to take these two boxes of parts that I bought off eBay, and I'm going to try to build at least one good locomotive out of these. I believe there's 7. Kind of going to show you a little bit of what's going on underneath. I'm doing a voiceover on this one because there was an hour and 40 minutes worth of video, and I had to speed some up, cut some out, and I'm going to show you kind of what they all looked like. This one's for a future video. This is an AHM. I think the motor came loose and the bracket broke inside that holds the motor in there in place. But I'm going to gut what's in these and build one. Here I'm just kind of going through the shells. I'm going to kind of show you what each one had or didn't have. A couple of them had wiring harnesses in them. A couple of them had one of them had a motor. A couple of them had just the rear truck with the eyelet and wire for power pickup for the rear. That right there is the one I am actually going to build. I wanted some of the coming around the mountain locomotives. One of the shells that came in, which actually was the one that was perfect, come in broke, and I ended up having to repair it. And then the other one I had purchased anyway, didn't have any handrails on it whatsoever. The chassis system I've got here in front of us, I'm going to put wiring to, and you're going to be able to see that it does run. I was able to put the wires to it and get the motor to run. So that motor I'm going to pull out, and I'm going to go ahead and throw that in the other shell. What you're looking at here is after I pulled the motor out, I went ahead and pulled the plate, the face plate, off of the motor, and the springs weren't cooked. You know, they weren't compressed like they got hot. The brushes were filthy. The commutator was filthy. There was a little bit of like fuzzy type stuff inside, like maybe at some point the motor had found a way to get some steel wool in it. And here I'm going to show you the disassembly of the motor and cleaning it up to put it back together. In the end, it didn't run the best. We're still dealing with a really old motor, but it does move forward and backward. It lights up like it's supposed to, and it doesn't stutter or anything. In order to clean the commutator, which is the piece I just pulled out, and clean the block, I just used a Q-tip and rubbing alcohol, which you're going to see here in a second. I took a screwdriver to the back of the housing to get rid of like the lint and stuff that accumulated in behind the gears. It's unreal how much garbage these things pick up, especially if you put track on carpet, or just the dust they collect in general. Since this didn't come with a set of trucks, I had a few in a box that I'd been saving that are actually going to fit perfect for this. Um, the engine block only had one screw to hold the bottom truck in, even though it snaps in, and the rear truck was actually identical, where it was a direct replacement. The only thing is, I did end up having to get the side rails on the trucks hot to pull the side mounts off and reattach them to another set of trucks that actually had a good set of hooks, or had a hook on them, so that I could put a coupler on them. Here you can see me cleaning the commutator with the Q-tip. I got most of it off. I couldn't get it all, but I got quite a bit of it. enough that I was gonna know there was a notable difference in its running capability. I took a toothpick too, and here in a second we should see it. Yeah, I'm still getting soot off of that commutator. Yep, there's the toothpick. So I took the toothpick and run it in those little channels around those plates on the commutator and pulled out anything in there, and then went ahead and put it back in. And you can see some more of the garbage I went ahead and cleaned out of the block. And as you can see, it moves really free. I went ahead and put the gear on the back so I didn't have any worry about the commutator falling back out. The magnets typically hold it, but if you was to drop it on the desk or something, I just didn't want it falling back out or jarring it. Those are the brushes. I went ahead and put them in rubbing alcohol and let them sit for a minute, and then just took my fingers and rolled them around in them to try to clean them up some. They're kind of worn, and that may be part of the reason why it doesn't run quite as well as I wanted it to, other than it being a cheaper Tyco. But I did clean them up best I could and went ahead and put them on that plate. And now as you see the plate that I'm getting ready to put on, you have to put the springs in the back, and they're really, really small, so I just use a screwdriver to set them in. And then you have to take the task of trying to set the plate on with the springs in the plate. And if I remember correctly, I take the springs, and actually I was able to set them on top of the brushes with a set of tweezers, and then just set the plate on really slowly. It didn't work the first time, but it worked the second time I did it. And you see here where I set the brushes on the springs and then push it together upside down. And I think I thought I got it the first time, and what had happened was one of the brushes fell on its side and rolled to the bottom of the motor. So whenever I tighten all this up, the plate set flush like I got it right, but it wouldn't run. And the way I test that is to take one of my older controllers and run one wire to one copper tab up to the right and one wire to the other little tab to see if it'll run. And there I'm testing to make sure it's got power before I do it, and I'm not getting anything. I turned the wheel or the commutator and it worked, but I still wasn't getting anything. So I went in and took it back apart and had figured it out, and then when I tested it, it worked. Kind of where I'm pointing there, where the pin comes through with the commutator, you can put it like a drop. When I say a drop, that's all you need of oil on the bearings to keep those to where they spin free. Put your gears on, your two on the bottom and your one on the top, and you can do it in that order, or you can take the little one off and slide the big one on and then put the little one back in. That's totally up to you. And then in the middle of doing this 3 or 4 times, always test your motor and make sure your motor's working. That way, if something happens, you don't get too far ahead and then you're like, well, where did I go wrong? So I constantly test them to make sure that they're still working while I'm putting them together. Here I'm going to show you kind of a comparison of what they look like. These two were the most similar. And here I'm robbing the rear truck out of it. And I believe I pull the wiring harness, or I don't need the wiring harness, but I pull it out of there too. And I pulled the springs out to put on the trucks, because there's a set of springs that go between the trucks and the plastic hangers that go up in the body. And do be careful. This plastic's really old and it's really hard, and sometimes it's difficult to get the truck mounts out of the bodies. But if you take your time and just be patient, they will come out. And you won't break the body, you won't break the truck mounts. There I've got the wiring harness out of it, and I believe this wiring harness there is the one I swapped. I think I put the other wiring harness in just to make sure I had everything right. And then if you look there, I test my light to make sure my light works. and it does. And those you do need to make sure you get in the copper bracket and they stay in it, and you do need to reattach them to the upper part of the body where they stay separated from the plastic, because those bulbs get very, very hot. I had a little bit of trouble doing this part. It wasn't the worst in the world, but I didn't want to try to fight and pull that body weight out because that's kind of hard to do, and I don't want to risk breaking the plastic. But I was able to feed that wire in from the front to the back before I went ahead and put the truck mount in and put the back end all together. And there's a pin right behind the windshield on that locomotive where that copper bracket, you just push it down and it attaches itself. Then your wires hang down to the front. You got one wire hanging down to the rear. Go ahead and run your wire through that mount and then put the mount up in the rear. And this is where I said you got to be patient and work at it, because it's not hard to break them trying to put those plastic mounts in. They're very snug. And there I worked that wire through. See, it's easier if you just put the mount in before you do that, and then attach the wire to the truck before you install the truck. I wish they would have put a little more wire on these engines. I know they scrimped and saved everywhere they could, but it makes it so hard sometimes to get everything lined up and put together when you have so little of room to do it. Here's where I'm going to go ahead and solder. This is very important, and I learned this doing that. Make sure that the wire coming from the back of the locomotive is wired to the vertical copper tab that's on the motor. If you wire it to the other one, you'll get a dead short when you go to put it on the track, and it won't work. And you'll see here I soldered them on incorrectly. I put the rear wire from the rear truck on the front not horizontal but diagonal tab, instead of soldering it to the vertical one that's the one that's actually to the back of the motor. Soldering never really was my forte, but I'm learning as I go. And it's terrible trying to get the camera to be where I want it to while I'm soldering, because it's either in my way, or I'm like knocking it off, or I'm bumping it, or things are getting hot and I'm burning my fingers. So it's just easier for me to kind of do it this way and then show you when it's finished. Now, if you're smart about it, like I wasn't here, you'll know that when you go to solder this all on, make sure your wiring is run through your plastic bracket in the front before you solder it to the motor, because there's really no easy way to get it off and on. The only real hole you have is the disconnection at the light bulb that you can take off and run that through the front, but it messes up trying to do it trying to get it through because the other wire is hard soldered and runs from the front to the back. So the only other way to do it, if you've already soldered it, if you don't want to resolder, is to take it back apart in the rear, pull the wire out, and then run it through that way. And it's just a pain in the neck. So do make sure to put your plastic bracket on before you solder to your motor. And you'll see here what I did was I went ahead and added an extension wire from the motor to the back so that I had some more room to pull out the motor to work on it if I needed to work on it in the future, which actually saved me a lot of hassle. This was a 2-day deal. I worked on it till 10 o'clock one night from like 7 o'clock, and then worked on it again today to get it finished. And this saves me some trouble too as far as soldering goes. I just use those clear, they look like butt connectors, but they have a piece of a metal ring in there like a solder joint in the center. You just push them together and then use your lighter. It heat shrinks and attaches the wires together at the same time. And here I am retesting the motor again to make sure it's still working. Testing it there to make sure it's still working. To make sure I still have a good connection and that wire is actually going to work. And you can see my screw up is still there. I've got the wire that runs to the rear in the wrong place, and I'm furthermore adding more solder to it, thinking I have it right when I don't. But that wire there that's between my fingers is supposed to run to the rear, and it's supposed to go on the vertical contact. That's the proper term, the vertical contact. And then the diagonal contact that I just soldered the light to, or that I didn't solder the light to, that's what that one's supposed to be on. So your light goes to the diagonal contact, and your wire that goes to the rear truck goes on the vertical contact. Otherwise, you will have a dead short. What you're seeing here is where I'm tying the wire from the rear truck to the copper tab that holds the headlight up in place, and as well adding or soldering the wire that I have incorrectly soldered to my motor to that copper bracket. That way the wire from the rear truck is still attached correctly. What I'm pointing to here is the trucks where I swapped the side rails out and glued them back on. I think I mentioned it before, but there's plastic rivets that are on those, and I just got them hot to pull them out and then stuck them in the new ones and then put glue on them. It is very important also to make sure that your pickups on the front and rear are on the correct sides. You should see brass on one side on the front truck and on the other side on the rear truck. If you don't do that correctly, your engine will not run as well. And here it is all finished. The light comes on as nice and bright. It doesn't stutter. It moves rather easily. Um, it's not as fast as I'd like it to be, but I think it just needs some time to break in. I appreciate you guys watching this, and if you have any comments or uh, anything you can help me out with, maybe some tools in the future that might save me some trouble, let me know. Uh, Thanks, guys.